Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of Business Spotlight. I'm your host, Martinique Brown. I'm so excited that you have decided to tune into the show today. I'm really excited about our guest here on the show, Anna J. Small Roseboro. She is really special to me in my life because she actually is the one that edits my calendars. I'm telling you, she is a lifesaver. I be thinking that it is so perfect that she's, Martinique, you need to go over this and this and this. But we all definitely need editors in our life that are really going to help and point out the things that, we think are great, but there are a few minor errors that will make our products perfect. So she's actually going to be telling us about her different services today because she is a writer's coach, a tutor for students, and a mentor for educators. So Anna, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So can you tell the viewers just a little bit more about yourself?
Well, first of all, I am married. I have been for 54 years.
Oh,
I'm a
wow.
college sweetheart. We have
Wow.
3 children. We've lived all over the country, and it's probably based on that moving from state to state, from Missouri to New York to Massachusetts to California,
Mm,
back to Michigan, that I have learned that different areas of the country have different issues that are important to their audience.
yeah.
And so, one of the things that I spend a lot of time with is figuring out who my audience is, what the purpose is of the publication that I'm helping new authors work with. Um,
Okay.
you mentioned that I also am a teacher. I've
Hmm.
taught middle school, high school, college, uh, private school, parochial school, public school. And that's one of the things that has come to play in the books that I have been able to publish. But again, it's those experiences in different parts of the country with students at different ages, of authors appealing to students at different ages, that's come and been valuable to me as I've had an opportunity to work primarily with new authors who are just getting started. And being a teacher helps me design lessons when I
Hmm.
meet with new authors.
That's good. That's good. So now, I know that one thing that I forgot to tell you all as the viewers, make sure that you post your questions and comments in the comment field so that I can relay those questions and comments to Anna. If you're watching from any other page other than Martinique Y. Brown, then I need you to come on over to that page so I can see your questions and your comments. So I know that you did mention that you were in the education field. What subjects did you actually teach before you retired?
Before I retired.
Mhm.
After the third time I retired, for the most part, I taught middle school and high school. For a short time while my children were young, I taught in a seminary. I taught adults for a couple of years because I could do that in the evening and be at home with the children.
Mhm.
But in terms of professionally, I taught in middle school and high school in most states. And then when I moved to Michigan, I taught graduate students who were preparing to be teachers. And I retired again. And then I started teaching at Calvin University. And there I was teaching oral communications and composition kind of classes.
But what specifically the subjects that were taught?
Mainly English
Mhm.
and uh, public speaking.
Okay. Okay.
The class topics changed, Black voices, um, rhetoric in literature and in speaking, Shakespeare, all of those, but mainly English and public speaking.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about, the details of the services that you actually offer. I know that I mentioned that you're a writing coach. What does that specifically entail, and how long have you been a coach?
That's a good question. It has a couple of answers.
Hmm.
The first is I've been a writing coach since 1987. I took a summer program through the National Writing Project that says that in order to be a good teacher, you have to coach students to write. And in order to coach them to write, you have to demonstrate what it means, which means I had to write along with my students. So if I was asking them to write a particular kind of essay, I would write one along with them. If I asked them to share their writing with members of the class, I would put my writing in there with no name on it. And so my writing would be among that which was shared. And because we were, at that time, we were using printout, typed or word processed, you couldn't tell by the handwriting who wrote it. And some of my writing got trashed. Consequently, I learned what it was like to be on the other end and receiving comments from students. And so once I became an official coach, which was about 5 years ago, when independent writing, self-published writing became the thing, many people wanted to publish their own books. They had excellent stories, but they weren't certain yet what the process would be, that it would take multiple revisions. And so about 5 years ago, I met a group called Hook a Sister Up. And it was a group that had a book exhibition so that independent writers could come and sell their books. And the lady who was running it invited me to do a workshop. And it was from that workshop that people who came said, will you keep helping me? And so out of that, I've helped probably a dozen authors get their books published just as a coach, reading what they write, giving them comments, suggesting ways that they can market their books. If they're writing a children's book, where to get illustrations, how do you decide what illustrations are appropriate for the particular age of the students, the age of the readers, that kind of thing. So really, I help you as much as you believe you need help. When you got it far enough, say, go for it.
So you really helped that author from the beginning to the end.
Correct.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
I would say, no, I usually start when someone has the draft of a book.
Okay.
Some people have been keeping notes, keeping a diary, planning a book. And then they will call me in and says, I've got this manuscript that I'd like to publish. And that's generally where I start. So far, I haven't begun working with an author who did not have an idea for a book.
Would you be open to that?
I'm willing to learn how to do anything. So if there's someone who thinks they would like to write and would like to consult with me, and that's how I generally start. If someone's interested, we make arrangements to meet. Before COVID, we would meet at the library or at lunch. Now that we are sequestering at home, we plan a Zoom meeting or a Facebook chat where we can see one another. And we'll talk about what the writer had in mind. And so if there's someone who is at that stage, I'd be glad to meet with you, decide how you believe my services can help you achieve your goals.
So now with that though, because I know that you mentioned that you would meet that individual at the library for a consultation, you're open to taking on clients nationwide?
Oh, yes. I wouldn't say, in fact, I was just on the phone with an author who's been in Nigeria for the last whatever. And she's back in the country now, but while she was there, we would consult by phone on her manuscript. I have another young man in Marseille, France, who I'm working with, a couple of authors who live, one lives in New York and another lives in North Carolina, because we can meet online, not limited to my geographical region.
Yeah. So now, why would an individual consider, or what should they consider when utilizing your services as a writing coach?
The first thing a writer should consider is the fact that writing is a process. And during that process, it is helpful to have input from others.
Mhm.
Sometimes that input would occur during the conference where the person would talk about what they have in mind and be willing to listen and be willing to be honest about what their goals are. And so, if, let's say, you're working on a calendar,
Mhm.
and I would ask you, if you're going to be printing a calendar, this is something that's going to be up on someone's wall for a year. You want it not only to look good, but you want it to reflect a standard of English that suggests that you understand what people are looking for on a calendar.
Mhm.
Somebody may be writing a children's book. That's a completely different issue. And so if you decide that you would like to work with a coach, be prepared to know that it's going to be more than putting words on paper. It will require multiple revisions. And that's one of the services that I offer. What should we look at now? How can we improve this manuscript so that it will get the message across to your readers that you believe, and you're going to hear me say God, you believe that God has given you to share with the world, with your readers.
So, because you have mentioned that there's multiple revisions that needs to come about, realistically, how long should an individual or an author um, have in mind that they want to get this book, have this book in hand? You know, because I think that we could be unrealistic with um, our goal of having this product and shipping it out, you know, when we don't consider, you know, there may have to be multiple revisions, and it takes time to think through how you want to change things up after you as a coach give us that suggestion of what needs to be changed.
We tend to do something called backward design. Most new writers have something special that they want to celebrate. And sometimes we may say, I'd like to have this book ready in time for my mother's birthday. When is your mother's birthday?
Yeah.
If it's 6 months out, we can probably do it. If
Okay.
it's 6 weeks out, I would say maybe you should plan this for another family gathering, another holiday or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
if you allot yourself 4 to 6 months from the time you begin consulting with me, it's very likely we can meet your release date
That's
if
good.
you are committed to the process of sending copies of your manuscript to me, giving me time to respond, taking the time to read my responses and comments, making the changes. And generally during this time, we would meet online to talk about my comments
Mm-hmm.
and to see, for me to stay on task to make certain that I understand what the author has in mind. But it's a collaborative process.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like that individual that comes to you and utilizes your service, they really have to have one patience and an open mind to change, you know,
Yes.
as well. Personality wise, how do you deal with the different personalities that you do have to deal with when it comes to help or critiquing somebody's baby?
Another good question. One of the things I do is recall what it was like to be a classroom teacher
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that different people learn in different ways. And during our consultation time, during the time that we're talking with one another, I try to pick up on what speaks to you and how I can address the issues in the paper or in the book that affirm what you're doing well, that point out what
Mm-hmm.
you can do better, and to recommend strategies that you can use to improve the writing so that it achieves your goal.
Mm-hmm.
So I adapt based on who you are,
Yeah.
who I am, and what we'd like to do together.
So let me ask you something. With saying that, if you have a person that is adamant in how they want something to be written, you as a professional, do you just step back and say, okay, if this is how you would like to have it, then go ahead, and you're still comfortable putting your name attached to it? Or would you rather just say, you know what, I don't want my name attached to this, because of these grammatical errors and things like that? How do you feel about that?
Generally, those people, those writers who decide to work with me, trust my judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to use the word judgment, but they trust my advice.
Okay.
If along the way they do not believe that what I'm recommending will help their writing be better, they may not come back again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the reasons I don't charge one price for everything.
Okay.
I charge as we move along. So, for instance, someone is working on, I mentioned the children's book, usually they are 20 to 30 pages. And I generally charge per word or per page for the time that I spend reading and commenting. So that would be one charge. After the writer gets back from me my comments, if they believe they were useful, they will contact me and usually say, thank you very much. What do I do next?
Mm-hmm.
And so we will look at what needs to be done next. Once again, I will send them an invoice. They will prepay that invoice. We will arrange a time to meet online and we will work on the next steps. And so, because it's coaching and not doing, uh, we usually go back and forth until the author feels confident to move on to the next step.
So when you mention it's coaching and not doing, is one of your services the doing? If somebody just wants you to just do it?
No, the closest I will come to do it is periodically. Again, I keep mentioning children's books because they have more moving parts to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the writers with whom I work have a great story. They hire a marvelous illustrator, but they're not sure how to lay out the book. And a couple of the writers, I have done the layout for them. Others, in fact, one young lady that I'm working with now is writing a book with her two daughters. That's one of their at home projects. And
Mm-hmm.
we meet online, the mother and the two daughters. We work on the story. They have hired an illustrator, and the mom wants me to teach her how to do the layout herself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I coach her through the process of setting up a book uh, that will be printed as a children's book. On the other hand, other people have books that they'd like to write. They don't have the time to learn how to do something, and they may hire me to do that step for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I thought was interesting when you were editing my calendar was there were different tiers. So you were saying, well, Martinique, I'll look at it once and then it would be better for me to look at it again. Why do you add that step in there? Why is that necessary?
We tend to look at our writing through different, I call it lenses.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're looking at what we write for what it says. Sometimes we're looking at what we write for how it is said.
Mm-hmm.
Other times we're looking at what my writing looks like on the page. Sometimes we're looking at our writing by what it would say to someone from a different perspective. And so if you are writing for academia, you'll use a level of language that is different than you might write if you were writing for middle school students.
Mm-hmm.
If you happen to be writing to an audience who is familiar with the Christian Bible, there are certain words and phrases that you know that your audience will understand. And so when I ask you, who is your audience?
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you, what do they know already? And what should they know when they finish reading your book? And the interim steps will be, what do I need to include in my book that will help move my audience from where I think they are to where I think they should be when they finish reading my book.
Mm-hmm.
And so multiple readings for multiple purposes.
It's good. It's good. And I never thought, I never thought that that would really, be the reasoning for it, but it makes sense, how you say that there's different lenses that you're looking at it each time that you read over it. So, what are some other reasons that a person should consider getting a writing coach? Because, and the reason why I asked this question to you is because I think some people, um, they may think, and I know this might sound a little harsh, but they're a lot better at writing than they really are. So, how do you speak to those individuals to even consider getting a writing coach to help them to be their best?
If new writers recognize that published writers have 8, 10, maybe 12 readers between the time they submit their manuscript for consideration until it becomes a printed book.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that this is the process that published writers go through. Generally, if you want to have your book published by someone else, they ask you to send an abstract, which would be a paragraph that describes your goal for the book, your audience for the book. They'll ask you to send in 1,000 words or 3 chapters. And an agent will decide from reading that whether or not they think it's worth their time
Mm-hmm.
to go through all that it takes to prepare a manuscript. And then they will take it to a marketing team, and that agent has to sell your book to the marketing team
Mm-hmm.
before the marketing team decides, yeah, I think this is a book that should be published. Yeah, I think it's worth hiring all of the people that they're going to have to hire to prepare that book for publication.
Mm-hmm.
Now, however, we have so many independent or self-publishing options that many people think that if they just get it on paper and get it printed, that it will sell.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I guess I'm filling a niche for those people who have mainly a personal book that they're not certain major publisher will choose to publish and sell themselves. And some people plan a book to celebrate something special within their family,
Mm-hmm.
but they want it to be well written. They wanted it to be well laid out. And so they will hire a coach to walk them through that process.
Yeah, yeah. So now, are you saying that, and don't look at the number in general, but are you saying that you're more so like those 8 to 10 people that has to do that work all wrapped into one? Is that you?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
One of the things I encourage new writers to do is to have other people read their book before they send it off to be published. They're called beta readers, BETA.
Mm-hmm.
Usually they are free. For example, whenever I'm preparing a book for publication, particularly if I'm writing about my family, I ask my sister to read it. She has absolutely no problem telling me if something is not working.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I often have my former students read the book. Some of the people that I mentor, if I'm writing, some of the books I've published are for teachers. I'll have 4 to 5 different teachers read the book and give me feedback on what I've written, what I plan to write, and the message I hope to get across. That's part of the process. So if I'm working with a new writer and the writer is doing a memoir, I'll ask them, is there someone in your family or someone in your friend circle who will read this and give you some feedback
Mhm.
before we make the next step? So, no, I'm not 8 or 10 people, but I can help guide and coach someone to find the 8 or 10 people that would be a part of the publication of a manuscript to be a print book.
So now is this are these beta readers actually reading that entire transcript
Manuscript.
manuscript?
It depends on at what point in the writing. Some people may choose to have a person just read the opening chapters. You know, if they may say, "This is a book I have in mind. This is what I've written. Would you read what I've written so far and tell me if you would keep reading?
Mhm.
And if so, what would you expect to find in the rest of the book? What do you want to know that I've suggested in the opening of the book?" And so you would have readers read for different purposes.
Okay. Okay. So it's kind of like they have to have those different lenses as well. And it sounds like they also you should also have pre-questions for them to answer. Because you know, a lot of times we'll have our family members and they love us so much. They're like, this is so good. You know, it can be horrible. um,
Uh, a good point. One of the things that can help your beta readers give you the feedback that will help you improve your book is to ask them to read and give you answers to specific questions. For example, if you are writing a piece of fiction has an introduction that introduces the main characters, the setting, and the problem.
mhm,
Usually there are 3 attempts to solve the problem. One of them is easy, one of them is with the help of a friend, and the third and the most difficult usually requires a moral or ethical decision. Are you having the characters in your book face these issues? Who's helping them? If you are writing a devotional book, your issues may be different. How are you going to
mhm,
organize it? Is this going to be the size of the book? Is this going to be something you want people to put on their bedside? Might be big and bulky.
I never thought about that.
Or is this something you want people to put in their backpack or their purse to take with
Mhm,
them to work? Or you want them to write in the margins? If so, you'll lay it out differently.
mhm.
All those kinds of questions. So I'll ask you, um, Martinique, who's your audience?
You want me to answer it?
You don't have to
Okay.
answer now.
Okay.
And I'll
Okay.
ask you, what do you want them to know and be able to do when they finish reading what you're publishing?
Mhm,
How do you know your book has that? And so you'll ask one of your beta readers to tell you, am I doing what I say I want to do?
mhm.
What questions do you have?
Yeah.
Etc. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. That's so good. So now, if you're just now tuning into the show, you are watching Business Spotlight. I have Anna Roseboro here on the show. She is actually a writer's coach as well as a tutor for students and a mentor for educators. If you have any questions or comments for Anna, make sure you go ahead and post them in the comment field. If you are interested in getting a consultation from Anna or just utilizing her services, make sure you go to that description box because all of her contact information is listed in the description box. Right there next to the dollar sign is where you'll find if you're a writer and you're interested in getting a coach. Right there is her website. And then if you're interested in her mentoring or tutoring, her email address is right there as well. Make sure you share this video now so more people will know about the show as well as know more about Anna and her services that she offers as well. I have a ton of questions, but time just doesn't allow for it. But what are some of the subjects that you tutor in? I know that you help with oral communication as well as English. Are those the only two subjects that you will tutor in?
At this point, yes. Uh, I work with students online who may be challenged in a classroom setting, and they may have more questions that they have about their assignments than they either have time or feel comfortable asking in class. And so occasionally their parents will contract with me to meet with their son or their daughter once a week. And usually during that time, we will either work on subjects that the teacher has assigned. Most of the time, we work on things that the student would like to do and is practicing using the skills that the student is learning in school. And so that's basically the way I tutor.
What did you mean when you said what the student would like to do? What does that part mean?
Um, Sometimes the students would like to learn how to write poetry,
Oh, okay.
and that's not what they're doing in class.
Mm-hmm.
Or the students would like to know how to write a story. And one of the young men I was working with last year um, liked to bowl. And so we wrote a story about a guy who was bowling and was having difficulties with the people in the lane next to him.
Yeah.
And so we pulled those together, and in class they were reading short stories. Said, what
Mm-hmm.
makes a short story good? What do you need to have in your story to make it a good story?
Mm-hmm.
And we went ahead. One time we were writing poetry based on being sick of being inside over the winter.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went online to find pictures to illustrate that poem. And so we had a chance to look at visual imagery, visual communication. How would this image support or expand what you've written in words? And the kid got a kick out of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I wrote my own book, and this summer we wrote an ebook
Oh,
based
wow.
on a story he wrote, images we found. We laid it out together because we could share the screen, and then he narrated it. So it's now an audiobook.
That's so good.
And so
He's a
those
high schooler or something?
no middle school.
Oh, he's so young. That's so good. So what does mentoring educators entail? And I find it interesting that you mentor educators, and that's actually one of the young ladies that's featured in my calendar. She's like a teacher for teachers. And so I always thought when the teacher has graduated, gotten their, all their certificates and license and all that stuff, I just thought that they were done. So what does mentoring an educator entail?
That's two questions. In many universities, graduate students who are earning advanced degrees are hired to teach general education classes. That means they know the content, but they do not yet know how to teach what they know. And
Mm-hmm.
so, as a mentor for educators, one of the things I do is ask them to slow down just a bit and get to know the students in the class, find out what they know already, and then figure out how you connect what you have to teach with what the students already know.
Mm-hmm.
Some teachers, particularly college teachers who have not gone through the teacher education program, think that if they can go and tell their students stuff, the students should be able to learn it. And I said, teaching is not telling. Teaching is not complete until you know the students have learned.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got to design ways for you to know what the students are learning, what you know. And so coaching educators, for the most part, is helping them, sharing with them some of the methods, some of the materials, some of the management. You have an hour with each class.
Mm-hmm.
Our attention span is about 20 minutes. What do you do with the rest of that time?
Mm. That's good.
How do
So
you, uh,
go ahead.
no, really, how do you manage it? How do you set up the class so students can talk with one another but stay on topic? How do you incorporate visuals, movement, student talk, student feedback? How do you plan homework? How do you decide what to give for homework? What's the purpose of homework?
Yeah, what is the purpose? That's what I always ask. What's the
Oh, then
purpose of
you have to
this?
read my newest book. It's called Planning with Purpose. And one of the
Okay.
things that I talk about in there, homework should be something that students practice what they've learned in class,
Hmm.
prepare for the upcoming class, or perfect a presentation that they're going to give to class. And if you can justify the homework by answering the why,
Hmm.
it's very likely that the homework that you're giving is useful, productive, and the students will recognize it's worth my time doing it. And
Hmm.
so when I'm mentoring teachers, that's mainly, it's another word for coaching
Okay.
the
Okay.
teachers.
So, do you feel that a teacher has to go through that rough patch or mess up before they do realize that they need a mentor?
I hope that they won't wait that long.
Hmm.
Uh, I encourage new teachers to connect with experienced teachers as early in their career as they can. None of us can make it by ourselves.
Hmm.
And if we know we're going to need help and know that we can be help, we can collaborate with one another through those rough spots. The rough spots are going to be there. You don't have to go through them alone.
That's good. So now it's funny that you actually mentioned a new teacher should connect with a veteran teacher. If that is a suggestion, why should a new teacher consider utilizing your service?
There may or may not be someone in their teaching setting who has the time to listen if the teacher's had a bad day. If the teacher has had a great day, they can call me and say, it worked.
Mm-hmm.
Things are coming along fine. What do I do to sustain this? Um, the young teachers that I worked with, for the most part on the national level, were new department chairs. That means they had been in the department and now they're the head of the department. And moving from being one among to one in the middle, where they are speaking to their department for the administration or speaking for their department to the administration, uh, it's tough. And
Mm-hmm.
for about 8 years, I mentored new department chairs to help them through that change from being one among many to
Yeah.
one in the middle.
So I know that we did talk a lot about new teachers. Do you think that a veteran teacher could benefit from you being their mentor?
I would say yes for the same reason. Many times, veteran teachers are in new teaching situations. They may move from one school to the other. They may move from one grade level to the other. They may move from teaching one content area to another content area. And having someone to consult with, to celebrate with, to collaborate with, to commiserate with, uh, may be worth having a veteran teacher consult. You know, just
Mm-hmm.
having someone who's been there to be able to listen, but also to be able to suggest options for moving forward.
Definitely. So I just want to give a shout out to Regina Patterson. She said, none of us are going to make it by ourselves. That's
Absolutely.
the truth. That is the truth though, and I'm really glad that you said that. And then I'm also glad that you mentioned that not everybody has time to be your mentor. So that's why it's so great that you are offering your service because I know myself, I like detailed responses and um, or answers to my questions. And sometimes the response from that person leads me to ask another question. So if that individual truly does not want to help you or be your mentor. They are just going to give you a quick response to get you off your back, but if you are somebody that, you want to utilize in a services, make sure you go to that description box and reach out to her. So why did you actually decide to start offering your services? Did you see a need that was out there?
Yes, I did see a need, and someone saw that what I was offering was doing the job. Most of the work that I do is based on recommendation. Someone with whom I worked hears about someone else who wants to write a book, and they will introduce us online.
Yeah.
They'll send a note, Martinique, uh, my friend so and so would like to write a book. Will you meet with her and see what you can do?
Mm-hmm.
And so most of them came that way. Some of them have come from workshops that I have done, and people in the workshop say, I like what you shared today. Can you help me with A, B, C, or D?
Mm-hmm.
And we will again meet online because most of them have been national. We'll meet online and talk about what they'd like to do next. And I tell them what my services are, what the charges are.
Yeah.
And to keep it business-like without and personal, I generally invoice the person ahead of time. They pay 24 hours before our meeting. We meet and it's done. If they want to meet again, we'll start the cycle again.
That's good. So I do have a question on the floor for you. This is coming from Regina. So the first question is, what are your thoughts about reverse mentoring? She says, this is where a younger slash less experienced person mentors the person with more experience. I didn't even know that was really possible.
Oh, that is the reason I continue to mentor. I
Mhm.
learned so much from the early career teachers, the new writers, that when I move on to the next project, the next writer, the next whatever, I draw on what I've learned from the new teachers. And
Mhm.
so reverse mentoring, I wouldn't call it reverse, I would say collaborating
Mhm.
with veteran teachers and novice teachers. Often a new teacher will come to a school setting
Mhm.
having just finished their graduate work, and they are more in tune with current research than someone who may
Mhm.
have been in the classroom for the past 10, 12 years.
That's
And so
true.
that new teacher has much to offer. And so I would say, yes, anyone who's willing to listen, to collaborate with you, do it.
Mhm. Mhm. So another question that she has is also, can you add details on how a mentee can make the most out of their mentor's time?
Probably being honest. Uh, if you're meeting with someone on a regular basis, keep notes, reflections, and take them with you when you go to meet with your mentor. The young people that I mentored last year who were first year college instructors,
Mhm.
they would come, I would say, they would come to the meetings with questions.
Mhm.
Said, this is what I tried to do. This is what worked. This is what didn't work. What do you recommend? And so the better prepared you are as a mentee, the more efficiently your time with your mentor can be.
Yeah, and one of the time keepers that I felt was really good, and some people aren't comfortable with doing this, meaning the person that's being recorded. So I would ask that instructor, is it okay if I just record our conversation? Because that all that time that's taking me to write it and everything like that, I'm like, it's taking me too long because I'm asking you to stop for a minute. Let me hold up and write this right quick. So that may be something that a mentee may want to consider when taking notes and things of that nature.
And
So go
that's
ahead.
new. When I first started mentoring, cell phones, you
Yeah.
didn't even have cell phones. And so you had to write or we were doing email. And so after many times we would just be exchanging emails. Now
Mm-hmm.
that we can meet online like you and I are doing, I can see you, you can see me, I can see your face if you still have a question.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can ask you, what else do you have?
Mm-hmm.
And generally, if I'm coaching someone after a session, I will write a summary. And
Oh,
so,
really?
yeah.
Oh, wow, you're good. um, so
You.
you are. So now, what separates your coaching, mentoring, and tutoring from other companies that offer the same services? And not only companies, but so much online. I see individuals offering, I can be your coach for X, Y, Z amount of money. But one of the things that I've heard is they're more so inputting into that person what has worked for them, and it's not real versed on what can work in different areas for people.
Probably the thing that might separate me from some is the fact that I come with 5 decades of experience
Mm-hmm.
and I'm retired, which means I do not have to depend solely on my mentoring to feed myself,
Mm-hmm.
which means I have a little more time, a little more flexibility than some of the people who offer their services. They take in a lot, but don't have time to give as much. And so that's the major difference.
Yeah.
I have the time that some people do not have. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have the pressure to bring in the cash in order to take care of my daily needs.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you choose to go with someone else, go based on recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
At least 3 of the authors that I've worked with this past year have been burned by online people who promise to do more than they can provide because they've overcommitted themselves.
Yeah.
And so part of my job was undoing what had been done by someone who had good intentions, but not enough time to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now I know that you actually mentioned your book. Do you have any other books that complement the services that you offer?
As a matter of fact, I have.
Yeah.
One of the things I try to do is to publish regularly myself, to publish my own writing, but to invite others to help with me. And the book that came out last year is called Experience Poems and Pictures.
Mm-hmm.
And in it are poems that I have written, but also artwork by students from the school where I used to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are, because I published this myself with another group, I had time to practice what it means to collaborate.
Mm-hmm.
The book now is available with 4 different languages because people saw it
Mm-hmm.
and said, this ought to be in Spanish. It says, I don't know Spanish.
Yeah.
I'll translate for you. I said, how much will it cost? Well, how many books can I get? And so we bargained for her translating the section
Mm-hmm.
into Spanish so that
Mm-hmm.
she could give books to her Spanish students. Another lady saw the book online who lives in Germany, and she
Mm-hmm.
says, this book should be in German. Says, I don't know German. She says, well, I can translate that section for you.
Mm-hmm.
But she didn't know enough English to
Yeah.
do the translation. And
Mm-hmm.
so after she translated into German, she gave it to a beta reader who knew German, who helped her with the translation. And
Mm.
then the fourth language, it's in French. The French teacher where I used to teach, in fact, I took classes with her, uh, translated a section of it into French. But the other books are books for teachers. One of them is called Getting Started,
Mm-hmm.
and it's designed for new teachers who happen to be teaching in places where they may not have a mentor. And so this is basically guideline for a brand new teacher who wants to review what they may have learned in college, but didn't know they were going to need it
Mm-hmm.
in the specific setting where they are. And the other one is teaching, specifically teaching literature. And I'm saying it's not intimidating to teach well. And so I write books for teachers. I write books myself to continue to experience what it's like to put a book out there and see how it sells.
What is that? Tell me a little bit about that book, Not Intimidating again. What did you
Okay.
say about that one?
Uh, Not Intimidating was a book designed for teaching different genres of literature.
Okay.
Uh, what's the difference in the way you teach a play versus a short story versus a poem versus nonfiction? How do you prepare lessons that will teach students how to read it, how to write about it, and then how to pattern it so that they can do the similar kind of writing? My thought is we know and can appreciate what others have done when we've tried to do it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I definitely thank you for being on the show and really just going into detail about all the services that you offer as a writer's coach, a tutor for students, and a mentor for educators. I hope that a lot of you all's questions were answered during this interview. Like I said before, if you're interested in utilizing any of Anna's services, make sure you go to that description box and reach out to her simply by going on her website, or you can email her as well. We hope that you continue to share this video now so that more people will know about Anna and her services. Make sure you tell other people about Anna as well, just because so many times we'll hear people say, "Oh man, I wish I knew a blase blah," or "I wish I could do such and such." Now that you know a lot more about the services that Anna provides, you can also just share this information to that friend or family member that you have as well. We hope that you guys have a great night, and we will talk to you all later. Bye.
Thank you.